everybody, and welcome again to Build Challenge. This is episode number 2. Thank you for joining me once again. Today, we do a little bit more work on our terminal here. We do a little bit of the model railroad details, which I actually cut out and don't show too much of because it didn't seem too relevant to this build, but that's the very first thing we're going to get started with here in this video is putting up some backdrops and cutting out some of the dig holes in the area, putting up the fascia, and so on and so forth. Again, I didn't really find that too relevant to the build challenge itself because the challenge isn't a model railroad necessarily, it's building a transition era map, essentially. So I cut out some of that, you guys get the gist, use the dig holes, put a fascia up, etc., etc. One thing I did find out, which you're going to see right here, is that it is in fact possible to copy and paste dig holes. It is not super reliable, it is a little glitchy, a little bit buggy, but it is completely doable. And it saved me a whole bunch of time because those dig holes aren't very big. So I just put a whole bunch of them down and then copied and pasted the whole section of it, and it worked out pretty decently. So here we go, putting in the fascia and the floor, and now we're gonna start getting into some of the fun stuff. What I'm doing here is trying to figure out how I'm gonna cover up the main line going out of view. So how am I gonna cut this into the wall? Am I gonna use a tunnel or am I gonna use my bridge technique? I end up going with the bridge technique, which you'll see in just a moment here. I am slightly ahead of myself as usual, but that's okay. I had a lot of fun doing this build, and we make a lot of progress today, to be honest with you. Lots of scenery, and I think I could probably finish up this build in one more episode, and then once it's ready for release, then I'll do another release video sort of thing. But I think we could do one more video here and then be good, because progress is going pretty quick. I'm pretty happy with it. Having a lot of fun, and it's pretty enjoyable. I've been running some trains on it so far, and it's quite nice. We'll do some cinematics at the end as well, so you guys can take a peek at that. So now on this side of the map, I was trying to decide how I'm gonna hide the exit, same thing, where the track goes out of view. And the first thing I wanted to try was this bridge technique, and it doesn't quite work. I can't get the angle correct, and it seemed a little bit out of place. I tried a couple different techniques, a couple different angles and stuff like that, and I just wasn't happy with the result. And what I end up with, which you'll see in a few seconds here, is I just get rid of the bridge idea completely, and I'm just gonna try to disguise it with some buildings. That's the only thing that I can really come up with. But here I am just trying to level out the terrain, get something that looks like a decent gradient, but it just never looked right. It just didn't seem like it was gonna work. So I think right about here, coming up any moment now, I'll delete the bridge, and then yeah, here we go. So I was looking for some Brooklyn-style buildings, some like downtown-y brownstones, like residential apartments and stuff like that, because I was thinking to myself, I need something that's gonna cover up the tracks that I can put up against the wall. And I still want to have like a really downtown-y feel, because this is supposed to be a big passenger terminal, you know? It's gonna be in the heart of a city somewhere. There's gonna be, you know, places where people live. So in the back of my mind, I had these images of Chicago, I don't remember what the station is there, it's Chicago Union Station maybe, or those iconic photos of like the Super Chief and the Zephyr and all these like awesome trains pulling in, and there's just like a web of tracks just cutting through downtown and going right up the backside of residential neighborhoods and factories and this sort of thing. So I kind of had that in the back of my head when I was building this, and that's kind of the look that I'm going for. But again, this map is meant to be basically anywhere. It's just a generic terminal and freight yard map. And I love it. I love the idea of it, because then you can just run whatever you want on it and, you know, just have some fun with it. What I'm doing here is trying to come up with some shallow relief structures. So there's not a whole lot of those out there. So what I'm doing is clipping some factories and some like downtown buildings into the backdrop and using them kind of as flats, like you'd see on a real model railroad, where there's not enough room for a full depth building. So I'll kind of cut away some of the building and just use the edges of it. And what's nice about this technique is that it gives a forced perspective, which I'll get into when I start detailing the station area. But you can basically layer some of these buildings just a little bit back from each other and stack them on top of each other, essentially, and it makes it look like a really deep scene. It's actually a technique that I used on my Franklin Avenue industrial map, so if you're curious and you have that, I believe that it was included with one of these. I can't remember now if it was Trainz Model Railroad or Trainz the New Era. I think Trainz Model Railroad. Yeah, it was included with Trainz Model Railroad. So you have Trainz Model Railroad Edition. Check out Franklin Avenue Industrial. That was my map, and take a look at how I did the backdrop and the background buildings. Because I'm going to use a similar technique here where it's just kind of layered and staggered. And it gives kind of like a bizarre forced depth for such a shallow scene. You know, it ends up working. You'll see a little bit more of it in just a moment. So here we're doing a little bit of ground texturing, a little bit of groundwork, just to get the overall look down. I finally found the correct ballast texture to match this track. I think one of you guys suggested it in one of my videos. I can't remember if it was the build challenge or if it was P&B episode, but found the right texture, the right ballast texture, so it matches now and it looks really good. So I'm just going through, just trying to get a base texture down, just so I had something to work with and I wasn't just staring at this gray grid. And right through here, again, I'm trying to do this shallow relief idea. So I'm bringing roads in and putting them on angles right along the edge of the backdrop, and just trying to make it look like it's a deeper scene than it actually is. Layer buildings and drop some of them into the ground, change the heights, and just make them into whatever is gonna look best for such a shallow scene. Because the main idea of this map is switching. It's all about switching and operating trains and stuff like that. You're not gonna be going for these really deep, like, cinematic vantage points, you know, from looking down the street or anything like that. You're really supposed to be looking at it from where you would be standing if this was a real model railroad, so right in the middle of the room. So I'm trying to focus on keeping that as relevant as possible, and trying to find assets that fit the 1950s, 1940s sort of feel was a little difficult because I wasn't really sure what to search for. I couldn't just type in 1950s, and of course, you know, if you use Content Manager and try to sort things by era, that just turns up with nothing. Like I think I tried to sort it out by 1950s and I got like 2 or 3 assets that showed up, so that was pretty useless. So I had to figure things out a little bit at a time. And actually what I ended up doing was looking at some of the other like transition era maps that are out there and just looking at what assets these guys use, whoever made some of these maps. And I just dropped them into my pick list while I was flying around in surveyor mode, and that was the best way that I could come up with getting the assets that I thought would fit the era best. And then from there I could find other related assets, you know, within the similar naming nomenclature and stuff like that. So that proved to be pretty helpful. One thing that I want to mention about the scenes here is that I wanted to do a fall scene. This was all supposed to be fall or early winter, and I just couldn't pick out the right trees. I thought that these trees that I'm using, the STRMM trees, I thought that they were all seasonal, but apparently only some of them are seasonal. I don't know which ones are seasonal and which ones aren't. And honestly, I just didn't have the time to take the time and plop a whole bunch of them down and see, you know, if they were seasonal or not. And I've also heard that they're not the greatest looking in fall colors. They're just kind of like one solid red or one solid orange instead of being like a gradient or whatever. So I ended up just keeping the textures that I'm using, some of these browns, and a lot of the dead vegetation and browning vegetation so that it looks like an industrial area. But you'll see that some of the shrubs and the trees and stuff like that are all green. So it is supposed to be summertime, and you know, it works. It doesn't kill me, so whatever. I really love the brown textures though. That's like my favorite color and texture for scenes. For some reason I like the dead vegetation. I don't know why. It's just has sort of a iconic feel in my head for some reason, but I think right in here somewhere is where I mess with the environmental settings to see if I can make some fall trees, or maybe it already passed by. I honestly can't remember. So I was just using like some of the similar assets that I normally use and just rearranging them a little bit differently. I did add some other assets that I normally don't use, and just trying to blend things together and just make it look as cohesive as possible. The grassy grass looks great in my opinion, and blend it with some of the older stuff. It looks really good. And really it's all just about blending the right textures together with other textures, and you know, it's all varying layers of textures. You got ground textures, you've got vegetation textures, you got textures in your buildings. You know, how do you bring all that together and have it make sense? So this part right here, I decided that I'm gonna add a junction. After thinking about it for a while off camera, I was like, I gotta add a junction there to get into the passenger yard. And right here, I'm gonna add a freight station in because I was looking at some pictures online, and it seems like there's a lot of there would be like big freight stations in the same areas as these big passenger terminals. I don't know why. I guess maybe because it's just a big concentration of tracks and industry. So, and I think also the old trains would have like a mix. Sometimes you'd see like a freight train with a couple passenger cars, or a passenger train with a couple of freight cars, and I think that's probably, those freight cars would probably go into these freight depots that were right by the passenger stations. And a note about this passenger station as well, one of you had mentioned that it is a European design. I'm sure it is, but there was nothing else that equated to what I wanted that had like 7 or 8 tracks and was an American design. So it fits to me. I think a lot of the early architecture was sort of more European anyway. If you look at the original Penn Station, sort of had a European look to it before they ripped it down and replaced it with Madison Square Garden. Rest in peace. But anyway, also what I'm doing here is shortening the depth of the scene, because I'm looking at that and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is way too deep of a scene for me to detail, especially a city scene that's supposed to be like downtown sort of feeling. So I was like, there's no way, I gotta make this a little bit more shallow, because it's gonna take an eternity to actually get it all put together. And the idea of this build challenge was not to have it be 1,000,000 episodes. You know, if I thought that this was gonna take a while, I would have put this build into the Trainz Model Railroad video series, which is probably where it should have ended up, but I digress. It's here now, it's part of the build challenge, and we're just gonna focus on the build itself and less about the model railroad aspect of it. So that is what it is. But at this point, I'm starting to add in some of the switch stands. I think these ones are built in. They're the CNR switch stands, and they look pretty nice. One thing I encountered here was that they stick pretty far out off of the track in some, like the bigger tall ones. So I couldn't, on the ladder, I had to use the short ones because the tall ones just stuck out too far and they were like in the way, like a train would clip it. So I ended up using more of these short ones. I like using the tall ones, but whatever, the short ones are fine. And I made sure that these were all aligned so that you could actually look at the color of the flag and the little light or gem or whatever that's on there that denotes what direction the switch is switched. So that way you don't have to use the big green and red arrows that show up. So now down at this end, I was trying to decide what kind of a scene I wanted to put in. And a lot of these like 1950s model railroads that I see always have some kind of like a gas station scene. So I was like, you know what, I gotta include that. It's kind of an iconic sort of thing, and it seems pretty cool. And I struggled a little bit right here trying to get the road to go the way that I want, because obviously you can't clip the road on an angle. It has to be on a 90-degree angle off the side of the fascia. You can't have a 45-degree angle. I mean, you can, but it just looks kind of silly, so I spent a little bit of time trying to figure out how to get that to look right, and I decided that a 90-degree angle, it was fine. It works. I covered up with some details and stuff like that and blended in, so it looks a lot better than I had initially thought in my head. But yeah, so I'm just going in, just doing a little bit of detail work in here. I had some cars, a tow truck, and some other stuff. And it comes out pretty cool with the billboard there and everything. In fact, I think it's one of my favorite scenes so far. At least, like, you know, if this was a real model railroad, I could imagine myself getting right down to eye level and just peeking right through the gas station there as the trains go by and stuff like that. So I really like that kind of feel. So yeah, just adding a little bit more details, and then after this, I get into a little bit more scenery, working my way back down towards the yard. So actually, I'm gonna leave it right here. You guys enjoy the rest of the time lapse, and we'll meet back up in live mode. I'll show you a couple things that I did off camera, and then we'll take a look at some cinematics, and then we'll call it a show. All right, see you in a few. Alright guys, so before we get into the live mode, I just want to thank a few donors. The first one is Zeb Pritchard, so you get Zeb's Furniture, that's the first one. Thank you so much for your donation, Zeb. Next up we have Lehigh and Northern, so thank you so much Lehigh and Northern for the donation. We have Lehigh and Northern Cement. Thank you for the donation once again. Next up we have Robert Morrison. Thank you so much, Robert, for the kind donation. So we have Robert's Gas and Auto Repairs. Thank you so much. Next up, a big thank you to Norman Lloyd. Thank you so much, Norman, for the kind donation. We have Norman's Goods here. Thank you so much. Next up, a big thank you to Daryl Gee. Thank you so much, Daryl. We have Daryl's Depot. Thank you for the donation once again. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to thank David Noble for the kind donation. So right here we have David's Bistro and General Store. Thank you once again for the donations, and thank you everybody else for all of the kind donations for needles and whatever else you guys were donating to me for. I really appreciate it. Surely helps keep my channel going and helps support me in the work that I put into this. So thank you so much. Now let's get into the rest of this video here. The last segment of it, I'm going to show you guys what I did off camera. Mostly it's a lot of scenicking that I didn't think I needed to show it to you guys. So here it is. I went ahead and just did a little bit more scenicking and detail work right through the passenger yard here. And just used a lot of grassy textures, the thin grassy spline and grassy grass on the sides here look really great. I also used this building here for an engine shed. On the track plan, there was supposed to be an engine shed here for, I'm guessing, just for the local switchers. So I found this one. Wait, what am I doing here? Let's see. It's YRGF Old Engine House 04. I really like the look of it. I think it fits the era and everything. It's a little beat up, but it has like kind of a rundown look. So I went ahead and put that down, textured it a little bit, and put a little detail around the backside. I think it looks pretty sharp. And as I said, I went ahead and did all of the switch stands through the whole area. So now we can run some trains, do some testing, which we will see in just a moment. And I guess I'll just do a little fly through here so you guys can get an idea for the feel of it. I definitely like the way that it's coming out. The details are really great. Let's zoom out a little tiny bit. Get an overall feel of it, just like if you were standing there looking at this in somebody's house. Very cool, very cool. I'll put some trains down and we're gonna run them in just a moment. One thing also that I did off of camera is I added the switches over here. I wasn't sure what to use, because I know they're not gonna use switch stands, because there's not gonna be, you're not gonna see a conductor get out of a train, a passenger train, and go switch the tracks, and they're not gonna send somebody out of the tower to go switch it. So I know that they use some kind of an interlocking system to control these major interchanges, but I wasn't really too sure how to best represent that here in Trainz. So I went and downloaded a few of these switch machines. I'll put the link in the description. US&S point machine. These are not the ones that I use the needles. These are different. So you won't have to go to that other website. These ones look a little bit nicer as well. So we've got that switched out. And the last thing that I was going to show you is this area here. As I was saying, I couldn't really get a bridge in here, I guess. Although now maybe I could, because I lessened the depth of the scene. But so maybe I could, but I'd like to keep some of these downtown buildings here, and I like the look of that. But otherwise, what I was thinking was, if you were actually observing it, you'd be standing somewhere around here at the closest. If I fill this area with some buildings, maybe up in here as well, you won't see the tracks disappear into the wall. So it might be a good way to obscure it and hide it a little bit. But now that I'm looking at it, maybe I'll try again with the bridge and see if maybe I can cut it on an angle and make that work. Because that would be, honestly, I think that's probably the best solution, in my opinion. Rather than having it kind of disappear behind some buildings. So, I don't know, I'll do that off camera before the next episode, and yeah, I think that's about it. Thanks again, guys, for all of the feedback on the last episode. You guys gave me so many suggestions. I don't even know what I'm gonna do. It's gonna be very difficult to pick out what the next challenge is gonna be, and you guys gave me a whole lot of options. Honestly, I think that might be the most commented video that I've produced so far. So thank you for all the suggestions. Keep them coming if you have any more ideas. Again, I'm taking suggestions that might be a timed challenge or using certain assets and things like that. So feel free to come up with any kind of crazy ideas that you come up with. Keep it small though. This is almost even too big. I'm not even sure how many baseboards this is. Hey, look. I guess 1, 2. Technically, this is three baseboards. So this is almost pushing the limit of how big I would want to go. But if we can keep it within 1 or 2 baseboards, that would be ideal for these build challenges. I'm looking for something that I can build maybe in an afternoon or an evening, or maybe 2, and just challenge myself and try to do it as in a timely fashion as possible, and fill that void between some of these other series that are on the way that I've got planned for the fall and the winter. So, all right, that's it, guys. Thank you guys so much again for watching. Enjoy the cinematics, and I'll see you again in the next build challenge. Bye-bye.